Today is the day where we consider the power of understanding more deeply, in a broader perspective. It's also the seventh day of the month. Seventh month of the year. 7th month of the year. Just getting my bearings. There's a lot of months in the year. There's 12 of them. You can get lost in those months. I trust that you've all recovered from the 4th of July week. Yes? Good. We had a good celebration. We were happy to be together as a family with our 2 dogs. We gave them care and concern on the 4th of July because, fireworks can be a challenge for the pets, yeah. And it just reminded us once again how important these furry friends are to our families and to our lives as human beings. Today I want to talk to you about the topic of beyond belief. I'm hoping that what I'm going to share with you today is a blessing to you because it has been a blessing to me as my understanding of faith has grown throughout the years. I want to celebrate today the process of faith, how faith takes us from believing, and from believing to knowing, and from knowing to understanding. You see, Charles Fillmore taught us that it is not only a requirement for us to believe in truth, but to know it. And in knowing truth, to understand it. Because it is in being an understanding participant in the power and activity of God within us that we become collaborators and co-creators with God in our lives. Do you get that? Right? God can only do for us what we invite God to be a part of. What we consciously and intentionally open up within us, in our minds and our hearts and our lives, that we open up to God. That is the domain that we give God access to. And when we do this with understanding, we do it from a point of view that we are co-creators, collaborators with the Spirit and the power of God. The power of understanding is the ability to apprehend, to comprehend, and to know that the Spirit works within us in a lawful and orderly way. I love the word apprehend. I sometimes get kind of blank feedback from Americans when I use the word apprehend. I remember teaching a workshop once, and I take the word apprehend for granted, and I turned to the class and I said, "What's your understanding of the word apprehend?" And they said, "Well, that's when you get arrested and you go to jail." And I tried to think about that metaphysically, and I couldn't it's just, okay. Apprehension is that thing before comprehension when you go, aha, I get it. Charles Fillmore used to teach that the process for making divine truth your own is first to apprehend it and then to appropriate it, to take it, to make it yours, to use it constructively. It's the mind and the heart, the apprehension, the intellectual understanding of something before it can become an authentic, heartfelt experience. Juicing it up. Apprehension plugs us in. The heart powers us up. Right? Plugged in, powered up. Plugged in, powered up. And so faith is this wonderful power, this almost motherness of God that does the nurturing and the nourishing, taking us first from the power of belief into the power of knowing. There's more certainty in the power of knowing. When we believe something, we have a superficial acknowledgement of it. But when we know something, we have certainty, we have assurance. And then when we finally come to understand it, we have the courage and the confidence and the competency to use it actively in our lives. And that's what faith does to us. As faith grows, it takes us from that superficial believing to that deeper assurance of knowing, to that concrete confidence of understanding that when I do this, that happens. Not once or twice, but every single time by the grace of God. And we see this every day in our lives. We see this demonstrated every day in our lives. It is the way we function in the acquiring of new skills and abilities. I've said this to you before, and I'll say it again, and I apologize if you're like, you know what, we've heard that. But it's important. This continuum we go on is from being unconsciously incompetent, right? As we grow as human beings in most aspects of our lives, we first don't know anything, and we don't know that we don't know anything. It's a very dangerous place to be. It's normally when we're in that place that we think we know everything about everything. And we're a danger to ourselves and everybody else, you know. It's like a little knowledge is worse than no knowledge at all, because you think you're an expert. So we go from being unconsciously incompetent to what's the next phase? Consciously incompetent. Hell, I don't know anything about this. I need to find out what's going on. So we start to learn skills, and we practice, and we become more competent. We now become consciously competent. Hey, I know what I'm doing, and I know how to do it, and I'm feeling pretty competent about that. And then we get to the final stage, which to me is the divine stage of human achievement, is when we become unconsciously competent. We know what we're doing it well, and we're not even thinking about it. We just do it, right? That's the way we drive our cars these days, don't we? We're not thinking about driving anymore. We're on the phone, we're listening to the music. I saw somebody the other day driving, drinking a Slurpee, talking on the phone, painting her nails. Hey, I'm not saying anything, ladies. Just telling you what I saw. You know? I'm sure there's guys out there that are drinking Slurpees, and it's not a gender thing. And she was doing it well. Good, you know. Scott. Okay. And she was doing it well. She was driving okay. But that's how confident she's become. You know, I got my driver's license in South Africa. Now, you Americans, you know, you got an easy life. When you go to check out, to get your driver's license to pass out, you show up in an automatic, right? Yes? Not in South Africa. You got to pass out with a stick shift. You got to know how to use the clutch. Yeah. And you got to go sit that car on a hill with the safety brake or the handbrake up, and you got to know how to get up that hill without rolling back and hitting the instructor behind you. Otherwise, there's no driver's license. So everything in our lives basically starts where we get an intellectual idea of something, an apprehension of its potential and possibility for ourselves and for each other. And we grow by faith into a believing that this is possible, and then a certainty of knowing it is possible, and then to a divine place of understanding spiritually exactly the law that operates it, and becoming competent and confident in how that law of divine good shows up in us and in our lives. Charles Fillmore says, the divine idea of the underlying reality of all things. The divine idea is the underlying reality of all things. Everything that shows up in our lives begins as an idea in God's mind, a perfect idea. Substance is everywhere present. It pervades everything. The spiritual substance out of which all that is good can exist, exists everywhere in its full and complete potential. It is the spiritual essence and living energy out of which everything is made. Through substance, all the attributes of divine being are expressed. It sustains and enriches every idea that is projected into it. Divine substance is humankind's supply of divine good. And out of it we form whatever we need according to our faith and our understanding. And so God, in the aspect of understanding, is calling us not to be blind in our faith, but to be enlightened in our faith. To have a faith that is educated and informed. Have a faith that is applied to our life experience every day. That is coming more fully into the blessing of knowing and the blessing of understanding how the law of God works in our lives. Charles Former also went on to say, Albert Einstein. Yes, Albert Einstein was spiritual. Did you know that? Have you read his stuff? That's a spiritual man. He said this, a better world shall emerge based on faith and understanding. Albert Einstein's a hero of mine, one of my spiritual mentors. Sometimes people go, what? When I share that? I see myself in Albert Einstein. As my hair gets grayer and takes on a life of its own, it's not going to be too long that I'm going to show up with an Albert Einstein hairdo. Amazing man. A man that looked into the mystery of science and saw spirit, saw substance, saw the divine essence everywhere present. Let's take this into our hearts and minds before we go into meditation. When we come into a faith that is linked with understanding, we get a peace that transcends everything. We know that the law of God works every single time in a lawful and orderly fashion. And as we grow in understanding how to use it, we know that the seed that we sow in our minds and hearts will produce a flower and will produce a harvest of good. Not once, not twice, by every time. And as we become more confident and competent in the using of God's presence and power for our good, our individual good and our collective good, we will change our worlds. One person, one life, one community, one country, one world at a time. So let's take a moment and go into a time of meditation and open our hearts and minds to this truth and invite divine understanding to come more fully to us today. John will lead us in a song, and let's prepare our hearts and minds for meditation.
In this very room, there's quite enough love for one like me. And in this very room, there's quite enough joy for one like me. And there's quite enough hope, and quite enough power to chase away any gloom. For Spirit